house. Twin brothers. My stuff was there. At least the furniture I could see through the windows, but they were living it up like nothing was wrong. The window I thought I busted through was replaced, and everything looked almost normal. But damn if you just don't know what to do when you come home and find two strangers living in the house. I wasn't even bothered that they could be out to kill me or something. You know what worried me? That they were going through my stuff, putting their grubby paws over my music CDs, my underwear, sleeping under my covers blankets. I would have stayed outside, just watching them move around like shadows behind the drapes. But then this nest of blackbirds made a racket flying out of that little elm tree in the front yard. And I see those twins at the window staring at me. And then the front door opened like someone was there inviting me inside. But no one was there. And something in the Lorraine brain said no monoxide leak, no drunken nightmare, move your ass. So I listened, and I bailed. Left my CDs and my clothes and my house behind. A few months later, one of them brothers found me in Utah, and I had to kill him. Now I got some of that out of the way. I need to tell you the important information. Enough with the history. I'm your secret agent, out in the field, getting you the files you need to stay alive. Theory. Somebody had to start building these things, right? I started snooping around. Who's backed up now? Get your pencils out. Near as I can tell, the original designer of the floor plans was a man named Jared Lewis. He tore down his own house in Topeka and built a new one on top of the foundation. Family left him at some point in the process. Okay, but here's more. Lewis was an old student or disciple of some nut named Jack Parsons. Man, oh man, is there a ton of background on Parsons. Too much to go into here. But this Lewis guy went after this home building project like he was some land-based Noah. So I'm still collecting information on this Jared Lewis and his little group of followers. I should also have some goodies, an actual floor plan, and maybe some photos of the house, assuming I get up the courage to visit the one in the city once got it now. Damn, gotta go. Talk more later. And that brings an end to Diania House.
So unfortunately, that is a pretty abrupt cliffhanger. But this isn't the author's fault. This isn't the case of an author simply getting bored and not wanting to continue their work, but instead an example of an author being forced to quit the project he's working on. See, the author is Eric Heiser, and this story would actually become so successful that he would end up selling the rights of the story to Warner Brothers. They wanted to turn this into a big feature film since it was gaining so much popularity, but because of Warner Brothers owning the rights, they would eventually forbid Eric from updating the story online. Wanted to save all the ideas and everything for the movie, seemingly. But this movie wouldn't come to fruition, at least not by a big studio. It got stuck in development hell for several years, and there hasn't been any progress made on developing it further in a very long time, so it's unlikely that unless something is to change, this movie is never going to see the light of day. Nor are updates going to be allowed until somehow Eric is granted permission to do so. And seeing as how it's been almost 20 years, that's unlikely. However, the happy ending here is that Eric has actually had a very promising career as a screenwriter. He's been attached to several really big projects, such as the 2008 Nightmare on Elm Street remake, The Conjuring 2, and Arrival. So at the very least, the Diania House not coming to fruition is more a minor setback that paved the way for a promising career. So things ended up very well for the real-life Eric, but obviously, as we know, the same can't be said for his Diania House counterparts. Speaking of, I feel that even though the story was left unfinished, there is more than enough information for us to put together what's really going on in the world of Diania House. Let's start with the last piece of the puzzle that was presented to us in the very last entry of the story by Lorraine Mathers, that being the real-world figure of Jack Parsons. And Parsons was a very interesting figure, to put it lightly. Parsons was born on October 2nd, 1914, and was known primarily for two things, being a rocket engineer, and more importantly for the sake of the story, an occultist. He has quite the resume. In 1939, Parsons would join the Thelema religion, which was the religion started by Aleister Crowley. Now, Crowley is an interesting figure in his own right, and I am in no way, shape, or form an expert on him, Parsons, or the Thelema religion, so this is what Wikipedia has to say describing this religion. The core of Thelemic thought is, do what thou wilt. However, beyond this, there exists a wide range of interpretation of Thelema. Modern Thelema is a syncretic philosophy and religion, and many Thelemites try to avoid
1,000.
strongly dogmatic thinking. Crowley emphasized that each individual should follow their own inherent true will rather than blindly following his teachings, saying he did not wish to found a flock of sheep. Thus, contemporary Thelemites may practice more than one religion, including Wicca, Gnosticism, Satanism, and Luciferianism. Many adherents of Thelema recognize correlations between Thelemic and other systems of spiritual thought. Most borrow freely from methods and practices of other traditions, including alchemy, astrology, Kabbalah, Tantra, tarot divination, and yoga. I probably mispronounced a lot of those words, my bad. So that in and of itself is a lot to unpack, and we won't be doing a deep dive into that. We just simply don't have the time here with how long this video is already. Important for the story is that they believe in magic, alchemy, sort of dark art stuff, and the supernatural. So Parsons would go on to join this, and would become pretty involved, and would practice some of their rituals and religious practices. And through one of these alleged rituals or practices, he would say that the Antichrist had come to embody his soul, and he would even write a book called The Book of the Antichrist. Now, don't forget he was a rocket engineer, but that career would come to an end after, during the McCarthyism era and the Red Scare, he would be accused of espionage, and because of that was sort of blacklisted. But he would still find work. On June 17th, 1952, Parsons would actually be working on explosives for a movie. He'd be doing so in his home laboratory, which I believe was located in the basement. However, something would go wrong while he was doing so, and one of the explosives would go off, which would damage the property severely and would wound Parsons in the process. And Parsons would pass away a short time later as a result of his injuries. And while this death has officially been ruled as an accident, some believe that there could be more going on. That perhaps either Parsons took his own life, or that this was actually an act of murder. So that's Jack Parsons. I'm not really here to comment on the real life figure of him or anything, just needed to give that little bit of history so that way we could dive into what I think is going on in Diania House. And I think that the story was really going to take aspects of his death being a house explosion and his occult ties into it, and really make that the cause of what's going on. It doesn't say when the Diania House was first built, but we do know that it was built by a follower of Parsons named Jared Lewis. It is likely that this house was built shortly after Parsons' death, especially since he's described as a land-based smuggler, likely building this house rapidly. So I think there's two things that could be going on, both tying into Parsons' death in the world of Diania House. One is that it was supposed to be some sort of ritual, that Parsons was trying to ascend, reach some other state of being, which would go on to him potentially even possessing the house. Maybe once he was dead, Lewis was able to construct these and through something was able to put Parsons' soul in the house. Or maybe it wasn't intentional and Lewis was trying to save this person that he worshipped by similarly putting his soul in the house somehow. Or maybe even if it was supposed to be a ritual, the ritual went wrong. It was supposed to be some sort of portal through time and space, but it ended up taking Parsons' life. But that could be the reason that when Lewis would build the house, it would end up popping up in all these different spaces, sort of an example of a botched ritual. It does appear through time and space as planned, but it's possessed likely by Parsons or followers or by some entity that they summoned in, and now it needs to feed, to consume people, and anyone who knows about it is in danger. Look, I'm not completely married to any of these theories, but I am almost confident that Parsons' death being a house explosion with his ties to the occult and whatnot were almost certainly going to feed into the story about basically Monster House. But I feel like whatever one you want to apply here would be a good first point in the timeline. Parsons' death leads Lewis to build the houses, either to complete the ritual as a way to save Parsons' soul or to create their extra-dimensional house. Regardless, that date in 1952 is the very first point on our timeline, and the next point doesn't happen until 1999. A group of friends consisting of Eric, Mark, Andrew, Travis, and some others get together every Saturday night in Houston to play board games. They're called the Saturday Night Game. In the same year, John and Lucy Madsen would move into that town's equivalent of the Diania House. And strange things would start happening, which Lucy would share with her friend Diane. The pipes would start leaking, they'd have car troubles, there were strange noises, and something in the house was causing a leak that smelled like bile. And they would live there for only 4 months before eventually fleeing, going on to live in an RV for the next 4 years, and the house would eventually be turned over to Drew's stepdad, Kurt. And Drew would be forced to watch this place for 10 days, during which time the house would hollow him out and effectively turn him into a puppet of the house. He begins repeating phrases, TV shows, commercials, jingles, anything that he hears repeatedly, much to the annoyance of everyone at game night. And he quits going to game night altogether, and the group would sort of end up going their separate ways. Eric would even move to California, but Drew, under the influence of the house, would begin going state to state, living in different versions of the house and working at Blockbusters as a way to track where the Madsons could be. They got away from the house, and the house, through self-preservation, couldn't allow this. Now, in 2001, Lorraine Mathers would move into a version of the house in Idaho, but after the house would try to consume her, she would flee. She would come back 2 days later and find that there were puppets of the house living in it, and when she tried to sneak back in, she would eventually run away again after the door opened, when seemingly no one opened it. A few months later, one of the puppets would find her in Utah, and she would kill them in what is seemingly self-defense. However, she was arrested for this and tried, which would land her 9 months in a mental institution. Afterwards, she would go on to live a nomadic lifestyle, never settling down and always being on the move. In 2004, the Madsons' van would break down, which would cause them to temporarily stay with their cousins in Idaho. They would act strange during their stay, leaving the lights on at all time and barricading things like the closet door. But during their stay, Drew would find them at a diner and would kill the both of them before taking his own life as well. The house would send a clip of this article to Mark, who would then begin investigating it and would rope Eric in as well. And through their research, the two would find that something strange was certainly going on, and realize that it had to do with that house, that something there had hollowed Drew out and made him the way that he was. And as they unweave the web, they would find out that anyone who knows about this house is likely in danger. He would actually be able to get in touch with Lorraine, but we don't know what their conversation looked like, unfortunately. He would find the version of the house that Drew had stayed at, and would also find out that Drew's mom and stepdad had gone missing as well, presumably victims of the house. He would also make the discovery that the people that were living there prior were the Madsons, something that was seemingly unnoticed by police and investigators at the time. So he would fly out to Boise, where they were staying at the end of their life, and he would find an address to the place that Drew was staying. But when he got there, he noticed, impossibly, it was the exact same house as the one in Houston. He would go inside, texting Eric all the while that he did, but the house would eventually consume him. It would go on to spit his bones out on the street somewhere, and the house would email this article to Eric as a way to lure him in. And though he was initially apprehensive to follow through on investigating this, he would realize that, for Mark, he needs to. He would form a friendship with Mark's wife, Jen, trying to help her through all this, with the two of them sort of working together to investigate this. But Eric's wife, Colleen, would not appreciate this and would actually begin to assume that the two were having an affair. Someone named Mr. Paranoia would email Eric about another journal entry that he had found online that could relate to the Diania house, this one being in Arizona, the third house that they know of to date. This would follow a teenage girl named Danielle as she babysit a girl named Lenny. It seems as though Lenny's parents, or at least people pretending to be Lenny's parents, were researchers, trying to get to the bottom of what was going on at the house, as seen through their elaborate tech setup in the living room that seemed to react whenever the house would do something, such as change temperatures or when the attic would open. And though she was able to avoid an initial attempt of the house to lure in, she would fall victim to it too, and would then become a puppet to taunt Jenny to try and get her to come to the house. Eric would continue researching the house, during which he would notice a man in a sweatsuit was watching him. One night he would follow him, and would find where he went was the Diania house, another one in California. Eric would get together with a friend and go to the house against Jen's wishes, and judging by the fact that he set up an automated message to write if he didn't return, we know that the house consumed him as well. Around a year later, Colleen would try and pick up where her husband left off, where she would find that Lorraine Mathers had actually started writing a blog as well, See, the house had removed any record of what she had done. There was no criminal record for her, no court trial, nothing. It was as though her killing the puppet and spending the 9 months in the mental institution never happened. So she would start writing this blog, and Colleen would be made aware of it. And though the two did not seem to get along, that's really where the story ends. And we can assume because of this, Colleen, Jen, Laureen, all of them were likely taken by the house. After all, Laureen even says that it's only a matter of time before she's dragged into a house that smells like baked goods and warm blood. And that, as unfortunate and abrupt as it is what I believe happened. Until some miracle happens that lets us get more Diania house, that's kind of all we're left to infer with, seeing as it's been 20 years that the house eventually won. It got all the victims that it was hunting down, all our protagonists, but until we know for certain, that's really the only thing we can theorize. But, well, I would love to see the story finished. I don't think that's a horrible ending. It's bleak, but really, what was the alternative? If they escape, they're going to be hunted by the house forever, as this is an extra dimensional thing. Like, you know, it's one house that's many in all the different states, or in even kind of alludes that there could be one in every single city. And it would be a horrible ending if they just like went and blew one up and then that solved everything, or something along those lines. So honestly, although I am disappointed that the story, you know, doesn't finish properly, I'm alright with this ending. I think that sometimes a bleak ending like the house winning, especially considering most our main characters are already gone, and, you know, these would just be sort of new characters we have to care about, at least in the role of the protagonist, I'm alright with this. I would much prefer to see it finished, but given that that seems to be an impossibility, for me at least, this will do. But since there's a lot that isn't set in stone, let me know what you think in the comments. I would love to hear any theories you guys have about what could be going on here, as my theories are not only not confirmed, but are probably wrong. So I'd love to hear any other points of view. So with that, I want to thank you all very much for watching. I know this video was a little different. Like I said, I do intend to tell stories the usual way I tell them, but this was a fun change of pace, and I wanted to stay really faithful to this story and not really miss anything, especially just since I like the way it's told through emails and chat logs and diaries and whatnot. There are plenty of stories told that way, but this is, at least what I've seen, one of the earliest examples, and it's one that I enjoyed a lot, and I haven't covered a story like that on this channel, so I wanted to just actually try narrating this one. But yeah, that'll do it for today. Thanks everyone for watching, and I really hope you all have a great day. Bye.
2,500. 1,000. 400. 300. 200. 100. 90, 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, retard.